February 14th, 1944. 11:23 hours, 12,000 feet above Monte Cassino, Italy. Grid reference 4149 north, 1381 east. Lieutenant Marcus Webb sits in the Bombardier position of a B-25 Mitchell, staring through his Norden bomb sight at a landscape that appears as a uniform gray-green blur. His crew knows he failed the vision test. His squadron commander knows the medical board recommended reassignment to non-flight duties. What nobody knows is that Webb's deficiency, his partial colorblindness, allows him to see through camouflage that renders targets invisible to everyone else. In the next 47 minutes, his inability to perceive certain color wavelengths will locate 7 German defensive positions that 5 previous bombing runs missed completely. Positions that cost Allied ground forces 300 casualties attempting frontal assault, because nobody could identify where the defensive fire originated. But this is getting ahead of our story. The Italian campaign in early 1944 represents the most grinding, costly phase of the Allied advance through Europe. German forces under Field Marshal Albert Kesselring have established defensive lines across the Italian peninsula that exploit mountainous terrain to maximum advantage. The Gustav Line, anchored at Monte Cassino, blocks the road to Rome. Allied forces have been attacking since January 12th with minimal progress and catastrophic casualties. The problem isn't firepower or numbers, it's visibility. German defensive positions, artillery emplacements, machine gun nests, observation posts are camouflaged so effectively that attacking forces often don't locate them until after taking fire. Air reconnaissance photographs show terrain, but not fortifications. Bombardiers report hitting targets, but post-strike assessment reveals most bombs fell on empty ground, while actual German positions remained untouched. The technical challenge is camouflage methodology. German engineers use natural materials, vegetation, netting, treated with dyes that match surrounding terrain. When photographed from altitude or observed through optical sights, the camouflaged positions blend seamlessly with background. The human eye relies on color differentiation to identify objects. When camouflage matches the color signature of the surrounding environment, standard visual detection fails. By February 1944, German camouflage techniques at Monte Cassino are so effective that Allied intelligence estimates 60% of defensive positions remain unidentified despite intensive aerial reconnaissance. Lieutenant Marcus Webb shouldn't be flying combat missions at all. Born in 1920 in Portland, Oregon, he discovered his color vision deficiency during childhood when he consistently failed to identify numbers in Ishihara color plates. The condition is genetic, affecting approximately 8% of males of European descent. Webb's specific variant is Deuteranopia, inability to perceive green wavelengths normally. To him, greens and certain reds appear as shades of brown or gray. This disqualifies individuals from occupations requiring precise color discrimination, including military aviation, where identifying colored signals and warning lights is considered essential. Webb enlisted in 1942, passed initial screening because color vision testing was inconsistent across recruitment centers. He completed bombardier training at Midland Army Airfield, Texas, where instructors noted unusual performance characteristics. His accuracy on practice bombing runs was exceptional, but he consistently misidentified colored smoke markers used to designate target zones. An instructor, Captain Richard Torres, documented this in a training report filed December 1942. Trainee Webb demonstrates superior bombing accuracy but fails to correctly identify colored ground markers. Recommend additional color vision assessment before operational assignment. The assessment came in January 1943. Webb failed the Ishihara test completely, correctly identifying only 3 of 24 plates. The examining physician, Major Charles Hendricks, noted moderate Deuteranopia and recommended reassignment to non-flight duties. But Webb's bombing scores were in the 97th percentile, and the Army Air Forces needed bombardiers desperately. His squadron commander, Major James Sullivan, made an administrative decision that violated medical regulations but addressed operational needs. Webb could continue flying if he developed compensatory techniques for situations requiring color discrimination. Fellow crew members would verify colored signals, and Webb would focus exclusively on target identification and bomb release. What nobody recognized initially was that Webb's color deficiency wasn't merely a limitation to compensate for. Under specific conditions, it provided capability normal color vision couldn't match. The physics involved is straightforward but counterintuitive. Camouflage works by matching the color signature of the target to the color signature of the background. When an observer with normal color vision looks at effectively camouflaged positions, the color matching prevents differentiation. But an observer who doesn't perceive those color wavelengths sees only contrast differences, variations in brightness and texture that camouflage can't eliminate. To Webb, a camouflage net dyed green to match surrounding vegetation didn't disappear into the background. It appeared as a gray shape with different texture and reflectance than actual vegetation. The first indication of this capability came during a mission on January 28, 1944, targeting German artillery positions near Anzio beachhead. Intelligence had identified a suspected artillery battery location based on muzzle flash observations, but aerial reconnaissance photographs showed only empty terrain. Standard doctrine was to bomb the suspected coordinates and hope for secondary explosions indicating ammunition storage. Webb's aircraft, part of a six-plane formation, approached the target area at 10,000 feet under clear conditions. As the formation made its bombing run, Webb observed something other bombardiers didn't mention. A rectangular area approximately 40 meters by 60 meters showed different surface texture than surrounding terrain. Not different color because to Webb's vision, everything in that area appeared similar shades of gray-brown. Different texture. The rectangle had uniform fine texture while surrounding terrain showed irregular coarse texture. He adjusted his bomb release point to center on the textured rectangle rather than the coordinates provided by intelligence. His bombs impacted, followed 6 seconds later by massive secondary explosions indicating direct hits on ammunition storage. Post-strike reconnaissance confirmed destruction of a German artillery position concealed under camouflage netting. Intelligence analysts assumed the hit was lucky, that Webb's aim point happened to coincide with the actual target location. They didn't investigate why his aim point differed from the provided coordinates, and Webb didn't offer explanation because he wasn't certain himself why the rectangle had caught his attention. The pattern repeated on February 4th during a mission against German defensive positions blocking Highway 6 near Cassino. Intelligence provided coordinates for 3 suspected machine gun positions. Bombardiers from 5 aircraft reported difficulty identifying specific targets, noting that the area appeared as undifferentiated terrain. Most dropped on the provided coordinates and reported probable hits. Webb, looking through his bomb sight, saw 3 locations where surface texture patterns broke. Rectangular areas may be 15 meters by 20 meters each, showing the same uniform fine texture he'd noticed at Anzio. He ignored the intelligence coordinates and aimed for the texture anomalies. His bombs destroyed all 3 positions, later confirmed as camouflaged machine gun nests. After the February 4th mission, Webb's pilot, Captain Robert Hayes, asked how he'd identified targets that looked like empty ground to everyone else. Webb's explanation was tentative and technical. "I'm seeing texture differences, not color differences. The camouflage nets have uniform weave pattern that creates consistent surface texture. Natural vegetation has random irregular texture. My vision filters out the color matching, but the texture difference remains visible. It's like looking at a photograph where everything is shades of gray. Color camouflage doesn't work if you're not seeing color." Hayes reported this to Major Sullivan, who consulted with intelligence analysts. The analysts were skeptical. Camouflage effectiveness was well documented. Texture differences shouldn't be visible from bombing altitude, but Webb's hit rate was statistically anomalous. On missions where other bombardiers reported difficulty identifying targets, Webb consistently achieved direct hits. The evidence suggested he was detecting something others missed, even if the mechanism seemed implausible. The critical test came on February 14th. Allied forces were preparing another assault on Monte Cassino defensive positions. Pre-assault bombardment was scheduled to suppress German artillery and machine gun positions along the northern approach. Intelligence had identified approximate locations for 7 defensive positions based on ground force reports of where fire originated during previous assaults. But aerial reconnaissance couldn't pinpoint exact locations. Previous bombing runs had hit general areas without destroying the actual positions. Ground commanders were requesting precision strikes, but bombardiers couldn't hit targets they couldn't see. Major Sullivan assigned Webb's crew to lead a 6-aircraft formation tasked with destroying the 7 identified positions. The briefing at 0830 hours was explicit about the challenge. These positions have been hit 5 times. None of the strikes achieved destruction. Germans are using advanced camouflage. You'll be looking at terrain that photographs show as empty ground. Unless we destroy these positions before the ground assault, casualty estimates are 300 plus for the attacking battalion. This is not optional. We need these targets destroyed. Webb studied the reconnaissance photographs during mission planning. To analysts with normal color vision, the photographs showed mountainside terrain, vegetation, rock outcrops, no obvious defensive structures. Webb saw something different. In each of the 7 suspected areas, he identified rectangular or linear patterns where surface texture was too uniform. Natural terrain doesn't create geometric patterns. Human construction does, even when camouflaged. The texture signatures were subtle, requiring careful examination, but once identified, they were unmistakable to his vision. The formation departed at 10:47 hours, 6 B-25 Mitchells carrying 500-pound general-purpose bombs. Weather conditions were optimal, clear visibility, minimal wind. The target area was designated Zone Tango, a section of mountainside approximately 2 kilometers long and 800 meters vertical elevation. Intelligence assessment indicated German defensive positions distributed throughout the zone, but specific coordinates were unreliable. Standard procedure would be pattern bombing, saturating the entire zone with explosives and hoping to hit actual positions through volume of fire. Webb had a different approach. He'd marked his maps with the 7 texture anomaly locations identified during photograph analysis. Each location received specific coordinates based on the geometric center of the texture pattern. The bombing run would target these 7 points sequentially, requiring 3 passes over the target zone because aircraft spacing and bomb load limited engagement to 3 positions per pass. The tactic was risky because it gave German anti-aircraft gunners multiple opportunities to track the formation, but it was the only way to achieve the precision required. The first pass commenced at 1118 hours, altitude 12,000 feet, approach from southwest. Webb's bombsight was locked on coordinates for position 1, identified as a linear texture pattern approximately 50 meters long running parallel to the hillside contour. Through the sight, Webb saw what appeared to other crew members as random terrain. To his vision, the linear pattern was obvious, a strip of uniform texture cutting across irregular natural texture. He released at 11:21, bombs impacting precisely on the linear pattern. Secondary explosions followed, indicating ammunition or fuel storage. Post-strike assessment later confirmed destruction of a camouflaged trench system housing machine gun positions. Position 2 was targeted on the same pass by the aircraft following Webb's. The Bombardier, Lieutenant Paul Chen, had been briefed to aim for coordinates Webb provided rather than the general area designated by intelligence. Chen later reported he couldn't see any target at those coordinates, just mountainside, but he trusted Webb's identification. His bombs impacted, producing secondary explosions consistent with artillery position destruction. The third aircraft on the pass targeted position 3 with similar results. The formation circled for the second pass, while German anti-aircraft batteries attempted engagement. Flak bursts appeared at 11,500 feet, close enough to create turbulence but not direct hits. The second pass targeted positions 4, 5, and 6. Webb identified position 4 as a rectangular texture pattern approximately 30 meters by 40 meters, appearing to his vision as a two-uniform patch on the hillside. He released, watching impact through the bombsight. Direct hit, followed by explosions and debris cloud indicating structural destruction. Intelligence later identified this as a camouflaged observation post with reinforced concrete construction. Position 5 presented the most subtle texture signature. The pattern was irregular, but showed consistent fine texture across an area of maybe 20 meters diameter. Webb hesitated for 3 seconds before release, uncertain whether he was seeing actual construction or natural feature with coincidentally uniform texture. He released based on pattern geometry rather than confidence in identification. Impact produced the largest secondary explosion of the mission, a blast wave visible from altitude. Post-strike assessment identified it as a camouflaged ammunition bunker containing artillery shells, exactly what would produce that explosion signature. The third pass, targeting position 7, encountered heavy anti-aircraft fire. German gunners had ranged the formation's altitude and approach angle. Flak bursts appeared directly in the flight path, forcing evasive maneuvering that complicated bomb run setup. Webb's pilot, Captain Hayes, maintained course despite proximity of bursts, giving Webb stable platform for the final target. Position 7 appeared as a rectangular texture anomaly approximately 40 meters by 30 meters. Webb released at 11:42, bombs impacting center of the rectangle. The explosion was distinctive, indicating fuel storage destruction. Position 7 was later confirmed as a camouflaged fuel depot supporting German armor. The formation returned to base at 12:10 hours with minor shrapnel damage to 2 aircraft, no casualties. Mission debrief occurred at 13:30 hours, with intelligence analysts reviewing strike photography and ground force reports. The results were exceptional and nearly unprecedented. 7 targets identified, 7 targets destroyed. Ground forces assaulting the zone the following day reported encountering minimal defensive fire from positions that had previously inflicted heavy casualties. The defensive line that had held for 6 weeks collapsed in 18 hours once the camouflage positions were eliminated. The intelligence analysts wanted to understand how Webb had achieved identification precision that reconnaissance aircraft and previous bombardiers had missed. His explanation was technical and focused on visual perception mechanisms. Camouflage defeats color-based object recognition by matching target color signature to background color signature. My Deuteranopia eliminates color as a recognition factor. I'm seeing only brightness and texture. Camouflage nets and painted surfaces have manufactured texture that differs from natural terrain texture. That difference becomes visible when color isn't masking it. I'm not seeing something extra. I'm seeing without the color information that camouflage uses to hide targets. The operational implication was recognized immediately, but implementation proved complicated. Webb's capability was unique to his specific visual deficiency and couldn't be replicated by bombardiers with normal color vision. Training programs couldn't teach color normal observers to ignore color information their brains processed automatically. The capability also had limitations. It worked for camouflage that relied on color matching but was less effective against camouflage using 3-dimensional structure or actual vegetation rather than artificial netting. And it required high-quality optics and optimal visibility conditions. Weather, haze, or poor optical equipment degraded the subtle texture differences Webb relied on. The Army Air Force's response was pragmatic rather than systematic. Webb received assignment to missions specifically requiring identification of camouflage targets. Between February and August 1944, he flew 37 missions in Italy and southern France, targeting positions that intelligence suspected but couldn't visually confirm. His hit rate on suspected camouflaged positions was 73%, compared to approximately 18% for bombardiers with normal color vision. The difference represented hundreds of successful strikes on positions that would otherwise have remained operational, inflicting casualties on Allied ground forces. The broader application came through photography analysis. Intelligence analysts realized that if Webb could identify texture anomalies visually, Perhaps photographic techniques could enhance texture contrast while suppressing color information. This led to development of modified reconnaissance photography procedures using filters that emphasized certain wavelengths while blocking others. The techniques didn't replicate Webb's biological advantage perfectly, but improved camouflaged position detection rates by approximately 35% compared to standard color photography. Webb's contribution remained largely unrecognized outside specialized intelligence and bombardier communities. He received no special decorations for the February 14th mission, though it objectively saved numerous lives by eliminating defensive positions before ground assault. His military records note completion of combat missions with above-average bombing accuracy, but don't mention the color vision deficiency or its tactical application. Post-war, the capability was studied briefly by Air Force research programs, investigating how sensory variations affect military performance. But the studies produced limited actionable conclusions beyond confirming that certain visual deficiencies could provide advantages under specific narrow conditions. Marcus Webb survived the war and returned to Portland in 1945. He worked as a commercial photographer, an occupation where color vision deficiency created challenges in color film processing, but was manageable with compensatory techniques. He never publicly discussed his bombardier service or the missions targeting camouflaged positions. When military historians researching the Italian campaign interviewed veterans in the 1970s, Webb declined participation, stating that his role had been routine and unremarkable. He passed away in 1998 at age 78. His obituary in the Portland Oregonian mentioned his military service in passing, noting he'd served as a bombardier in the Mediterranean theater. Modern camouflage design explicitly addresses the texture recognition vulnerability Webb exploited. Military camouflage patterns now incorporate irregular texture variation and three-dimensional elements specifically to defeat detection by observers who might not rely on color vision. Thermal imaging and multispectral reconnaissance have largely superseded visual camouflage detection. But the fundamental principle Webb demonstrated remains valid. Any sensory limitation that eliminates information channels camouflage uses for concealment can potentially reveal what that camouflage is designed to hide. The February 14th mission demonstrates the broader principle that apparent limitations can provide unexpected capabilities under specific conditions. Webb's Deuteranopia was medically disqualifying for aviation service, but it enabled him to detect targets that normal color vision couldn't identify. The military system nearly excluded him based on the deficiency without recognizing the potential advantage. Only operational necessity and a commander willing to violate medical regulations allowed the capability to be discovered and applied. How many other marginally qualified personnel with non-standard characteristics might have provided similar unexpected advantages if given opportunity rather than exclusion? Military historians studying personnel selection and utilization note that rigid qualification standards, while ensuring baseline competence, can exclude individuals whose non-standard characteristics provide exceptional capability in narrow contexts. Webb's case suggests that some percentage of medically disqualified candidates might excel at specific tasks precisely because of their disqualifying conditions. Systematic exploitation of this would require identification methods the military hasn't developed, ways to match unusual capabilities to mission requirements that specifically benefit from those capabilities. February 14, 1944. 7 targets, 47 minutes. A bombardier who failed the vision test destroying camouflaged positions 5 previous missions missed. Ground forces advancing with minimal casualties because defensive positions that should have been invisible were eliminated before assault. That outcome resulted from matching a specific deficiency to a specific tactical problem under specific conditions where the deficiency became advantage. Official records don't capture that nuance. They note successful bombing missions, targets destroyed, objectives achieved. The mechanism, the unusual visual processing that enabled identification of invisible targets, disappears into generic mission reports. Webb never received recognition for capability that derived from the medical condition that nearly disqualified him from service. The system that almost excluded him credited his success without understanding its source. That's how innovation under constraint usually works. The advantage gets used, the results get recorded, and the actual mechanism that created the advantage gets lost in documentation that assumes standard capabilities produced non-standard outcomes.